Hi, I'm Corliss, the quiet one in a family that never saw me unless they needed something. 3 nights ago, at dinner, my sister raised her glass and called me a nobody with a name tag. Everyone laughed, like I was invisible. But what they didn't know is that the name they mocked was already written on the company they live off. 3 days later, she came to me crying, begging for mercy. And I still wonder, how far does family betrayal really go? They said it was a dinner to celebrate Dad's birthday. That's what the email said. Family dinner, semi-formal, Dad's turning 71. But when I walked into the private room at Dalton's Steakhouse, it felt more like a family board meeting, and I was the intern who got invited by mistake. The place smelled of charred meat and old wood. Soft jazz played overhead. Name tags sat neatly at each seat, gold-trimmed. Professional looking, like this was a business mixer. Mine was different. While everyone else had simple first names, mine read, Madeline Grace Porter, HR Director. Full name, full title, Nadine's doing, no doubt. She was already smiling too hard when I walked in. Glass of Merlot in hand. That smug little twitch at the corner of her mouth. I gave her a nod. She responded with that fake warmth only siblings can master after years of sharpening the blade. Her husband sat next to her, scrolling his phone like he couldn't be bothered. Mom and Dad were across the table, chatting with a cousin I barely remembered. I took my seat quietly and clipped the name tag on. A second later, I felt every eye in the room find it and smirk. Nadine raised her glass. To our little Maddie, she said with a wink. HR Queen. We gave her a name tag, so she doesn't forget who she is, or think she's someone else. Laughter. Dad chuckled. Even Mom gave a soft snort before sipping her wine. I smiled, small, tight, and kept my eyes on the butter dish. My face was hot, but my hands didn't tremble. I was past that. I turned the name tag face down and slid it beside the bread basket. I'd been the quiet one, the helper, the built-in babysitter, while Nadine collected trophies, beauty pageants, sorority awards, that ridiculous community leadership plaque. I'd been the girl who just did what needed to be done. No applause, no spotlight, just done. That toast wasn't just a joke. It was the latest in a long chain of reminders that in this family, I was always the footnote. I chewed my steak slower than usual, nodding when someone spoke to me, pretending the room didn't feel like a tilted stage one was sliding off. My mind had already left the table. It went back to that Thanksgiving years ago. Mom was sick. And I'd prepped everything, turkey, sides, dessert. Nadine had shown up last minute with store-bought cranberry sauce, and still managed to stand up and say, "Hope y'all enjoyed my dinner." And they clapped. I remembered the babysitting too, how Nadine would drop by with her kids and vanish for hours. Spa days, weekend getaways. Once, she texted me from Cancun while I was cleaning up spilled orange juice and a Lego-inflicted foot injury. She knew I wouldn't say no. And I never did. Back at the table, conversation turned to politics, then vacation homes, then grandkids. I sipped my water and tried to float above it all. Then Nadine leaned toward me with that same smile. "Hey, meant to tell you, I ran into Greg the other day." "You know, your boss?" I blinked. "Greg?" "Yeah, I was at that Chamber of Commerce thing. He's charming. We talked about team dynamics. I may've mentioned your assertiveness." There was a beat. Too long. I smiled. "You mean the event for executive leadership? You're not in corporate anymore." She sipped. "Still get invited. Old connections. You know how it is." My fingers curled under the table. I didn't ask what she said to him. I didn't need to. She planted a seed, and she knew it. The rest of dinner was a blur. I responded when spoken to, but I was already elsewhere, mapping the pattern, drawing the lines between the digs, the favors, the calculated encounters. I excused myself, said I needed to take a work call, walked through the dim hallway toward the restrooms. There was a mirror outside the women's room, tucked between two wall sconces. I looked into it. I saw the same eyes I'd always had, too observant, too patient, but something behind them was shifting. My grandmother used to say, "Don't raise your voice, improve your argument." She said it when I was 12 and cried after Nadine broke my science fair project and blamed the dog. I thought about that now. Standing under soft yellow light. Fixing my posture. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, my colleague. Hey, don't be late Monday. Surprise session. Big one. I didn't know what that meant. But I had a hunch it was going to matter. And I was going to be ready. I walked back into the room and picked up the name tag. Held it in my hand. Then smiled as I tucked it into my coat pocket. Dinner was winding down. Dessert was on the table. Someone was telling a joke. I took my seat again. Shoulders squared. Let them laugh. Monday came colder than expected. Even for Dallas. I got in early, too early. The city was just waking up as I slid my badge at the front door and climbed the quiet elevator to the 22nd floor. The HR wing was still dim. No chatter. No coffee brewing in the break room. Just the hum of overhead lights kicking on and the soft click of my heels against tile. I needed that silence. After the dinner, I'd spent the weekend pretending to be unaffected. Did laundry. Read half a book I couldn't remember now. But my mind stayed locked on that smirk Nadine wore when she said she spoke to my boss. When I stepped into my office, something felt off. The air had weight. Brianna, my junior, passed by with a polite nod, but didn't make eye contact. She always did, always asked about my weekend, commented on my shoes, something, but not today. There was a memo waiting for me on my desk. Executive review, emergency session. 9:30 a.m., Conference B. No sender, no explanation. I checked my calendar. Nothing scheduled. Whoever set this up wanted it to be a surprise. At 9:30 sharp, I walked into Conference B. Greg, my director, sat at the end of the table, arms crossed. Two other executives I didn't work closely with were there. Expressionless. No one made small talk. Greg started. Concerns have been raised about your leadership approach. Corliss, specifically around perceptions of favoritism and exclusionary dynamics. I blinked. From who? He didn't answer that. You're being asked to prepare a response memo addressing these points by end of day tomorrow. HR protocol. Protocol? There was no protocol for accusations without context. My name had been clean for 17 years. But I knew this wasn't about protocol. This was Nadine. She'd spoken to Greg, or someone close to him, and said just enough of the right things to spark this fire. Not a direct complaint. That wasn't her style. It would have been something sly. Something like, Corliss is great, but I worry she's too close to some of her staff. You know how HR can be. I walked out of the room with my heart pounding, not from panic, but clarity. She wanted a war, and she picked the wrong battlefield. Back home that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, laptop open, the room lit only by a side lamp. I couldn't stop thinking about junior year of high school. We had a science group project, Nadine and I plus 2 others. I stayed up 3 nights building our model. She turned in the report without my name on it. Told the teacher I didn't contribute. I lost credit. She won a certificate. Our parents said it was just a misunderstanding. I kept quiet then. But this wasn't high school. And this time, my career was on the line. I started digging. Emails, messages, calendar invites. I looked through everything. There it was, an email forwarded to Brianna weeks ago, titled, Intro, External Resource. The sender had a different name, but the writing? Too polished, too familiar. She called my department fluid and informal, great for creative minds. But perhaps lacking process. I cross-checked the visitor logs. There she was, Nadine Porter, signed in under Community Liaison. Brianna knocked on my door around 6 p.m. She looked nervous. Hey, can I say something? I nodded. Your sister, she came by. Like, 3 weeks ago. Said she used to work in leadership development. Said she was just stopping by. Networking. I didn't think anything of it. But, she asked weird questions. About you. How you delegate. Stuff like that. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I didn't blame her. Nadine could charm a locked vault open if she wanted to. Thanks for telling me. That night, I built a portfolio. Every metric. Every success. Client feedback. Performance scores. Peer reviews. I laid it out with timestamps and signatures. Not for defense, this wasn't panic. This was proof. I reread my grandmother's quote on the inside of my old planner. People will test your silence before they ever question their noise. This wasn't about saving face anymore. This was about reminding them, and her, who I was. I wasn't going to accuse. I wasn't going to react. I was going to show up with facts and let their own discomfort do the talking. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after I shut the laptop. My body was still, but my mind? Sharp, steady, ready. The next morning, a calendar invite popped up on my screen. HR review, performance and conduct. Wednesday 10 a.m., lead, internal audit. I didn't flinch. I clicked, accept. Then I closed the window. This time, I wasn't walking in as the one who needed to explain. I walked into the lobby of Hemsworth Inc. just after dawn. The lights were still bright. But the air felt thinner, less welcoming. More structured. My portfolio was tucked under my arm. Everything organized. Yet as I glanced at the atrium screen, I froze. Brand relaunch, led by Marceline Thornfield. My name wasn't listed anywhere. I stood there for a moment and let the cold hum of the air handler fill the silence. I reminded myself of Grandma's quiet voice, don't raise your voice. Improve your argument. The conference room that morning was full, staff. Outside consultants. Nearly everyone I knew and the ones I didn't. I sat, listening, as Marceline opened with over-friendly remarks. I want to acknowledge Corliss' dedication, as we embark on this relaunch. She smiled at me, nodding, but what came next was ebbing recognition into erasure. The slides flashed visuals I had drafted. The tags and budget numbers nearly identical to the documents I'd stayed late creating. Yet all the verbal credit fell under her team's banner. I watched. I didn't interrupt. It wasn't just irritation, it was clarity. I realized this was no longer mere competition. It was systematic erasure of my authorship. I pictured late nights, the sketches on legal pads, my team's laughter after a successful client meeting, gone. After the meeting I retreated to my office. The hallway felt familiar, the carpet soft underfoot, but my steps were heavier. I pulled out the archive folder I had kept for years, every draft. Every email I sent, every revision with my name in the header. Then I drafted an email to Gideon and HR, quiet. Professional, requesting acknowledgement of my contributions. This wasn't reaction, it was strategy. Later, the building was empty except for the cleaning crew. Ione, the intern, tapped my door softly. She held a file so carefully I saw hope and fear in her eyes. She said quietly, I recorded it, when Marceline said. I wrapped up Corliss' concept and presented it as the company's. A recording, a confession from someone with nothing to gain. I held the USB she handed me, the weight of it heavier than any contract I'd carried. In the moonlit parking lot I paused at the Hemsworth logo on the building. I felt the shift inside me. What I used to call dignity was just silence. And silence had cost me everything. I sent a reply email that night, effective immediately. I will no longer provide materials for projects where my name is absent. I will share documentation with the board and media. The next morning, I walked into Dad's office carrying a sealed envelope labeled Corliss Vale Hemsworth, verified work contributions. Dad's shock was muted. Marceline stormed in behind him. Cheeks flushed. She asked why legal counsel was involved. I stood calm. Your brand, I said, was built on my foundation. The door closed behind us. Cameras blinked in the lobby. The lines were drawn. The game changed. The lobby was mostly dark when I stepped back in, just the whir of floor buffers and distant chatter from the cleaning staff. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my phone buzzed. It was Ione. Can we meet? Now. In the CEO's office. I captured something. I stared at the elevator doors as they opened. Heart drumming, not from fear, but from something deeper, a shift, one I knew was coming. Marceline's office was empty. Ione stood beside the desk. Her face pale but steady. She held out a USB stick. On it, the words, too long ignored. Then a voice memo on her phone. I took them both. I slid the USB into my laptop. A familiar voice filtered through the speaker, Nadine's. Smug, clear. A nobody with a name tag, please. You know how this works. It was moments after that dinner. The one where I turned my name tag face down and swallowed my pride. But this wasn't a snide family jab over mashed potatoes. This was strategy. She's the kind that stays quiet. You just take the credit and smile. Ione didn't say much, just stood there and whispered. I requested the boardroom camera last week too. I think you'll want what's on it. The lobby TV flickered. My eyes lifted. It had been quiet, looping the usual company promo, but not now. The feed had changed. A shaky dinner clip was playing, Nadine's voice echoed again. My name tag was clearly visible. The insult, too. A red banner blinked at the bottom, breaking news, internal leak. Someone had uploaded it to the internal feed. Staff were stopping mid-step. AV was scrambling. And I stood off to the side. Laptop closed. Face calm. This wasn't panic. This was ignition. I recalled the strategist's warning from months ago. You can either tell your story or let someone else tell it for you. I pulled up a pre-drafted press release from my phone. Hit send. A curated list of journalists and corporate watchdogs received the headline, Hemsworth Inc. Leadership Under Review. Then I walked out the front doors. Into the cool night. Into the light. I didn't flinch. Hours later, back home in my study, I paced the rug, blinds drawn tight. The room was quiet except for the occasional hum of the radiator. I opened my journal and wrote, for years I stood behind the curtain. Tonight, I moved to the stage. I sent everything, the voice memo, the video, and the name tag story, to my lawyer. Requested formal board review. Then I sat at my desk and wrote something else. A blog post, personal, titled it, When They Call You Nobody. When they call you a nobody for wearing a name tag, wear it louder next time. The post went live. Beside me, on the shelf, the name tag from that night rested in a file box. It looked different now, not like a label, like a medal. Before the sun was up, I was back at the office. A 6 a.m. board meeting. Already planned. Security let Marceline in ahead of me. She didn't see me at first. But when she turned toward the lobby cameras, her face changed. Her staff were rushing, her voice sharp, her confidence cracked. I walked in through the side door, nodded at Dad, handed him a folder. Good morning, I said, placing my phone on the conference table. I've prepared the agenda. Marceline's voice tried to rise over mine, but I kept steady. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. This isn't about revenge, I told the board, eyes level. It's about restoration and accountability. I held up the USB. All the proof is here. There was a hush. Then heads started turning, papers shifting. The air in the room tightened, not with tension, but with attention. I was no longer reacting. I was leading. I got there before the sun did. The building sat quiet, still asleep, with only the security lights humming low in the corners. My heels echoed through the lobby, each step sharper than the last. The place felt different now. Not intimidating, not distant, just hollow. Inside my coat pocket, the USB thumped lightly against my phone. Archive 1 names and dates. That was all it said. But I knew what it carried, every lie, every theft, every rewrite of my work with her signature on it. I walked past the elevators. Took the stairs instead. Needed the time. Dad was standing at the hallway near the boardroom. Morning, he said, too politely, too fake. Morning, I said back, just as flat. Marceline stood 10 feet away, eyes on her phone, lips pressed so tight they looked like one line. Her assistant leaned in to whisper something. 2 board members glanced over their shoulders at me, then back to her. She still wouldn't look my way. I whispered to myself, the time is always right to do what is right. And with that, I walked to the door. The boardroom opened. Everyone took their seats. I waited until the last one was down before I moved. I didn't speak right away, just walked to the head of the table and plugged in my laptop. The screen lit up. Slide 1. Emails, contracts, visitor logs, project drafts. Every single one had her name. Not mine. This, I began, is the original work, drafted by my team, signed off by me, then, redirected for someone else's credit. It landed like a dropped plate. Gasps. Shuffling. Dad's hand smacked the table. What is this? Marceline froze. She didn't speak. Couldn't. I clicked again. Slide 2. A full contract, with a major vendor, signed entirely in her name. But the work, the budget, the planning? Mine. Not one of you reviewed this. I said. Not once did anyone ask why my name disappeared. The silence swallowed everything. I shut the laptop. Questions? One of the older directors finally spoke. Is this verifiable? Every file is timestamped. I've also sent copies to your company emails, plus legal. I locked eyes with Marceline. Her face twitched, just slightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't deny it. By noon, I was in the hallway outside the boardroom when my phone buzzed. Vendor terminated. Official reason? Leadership uncertainty. I looked through the glass wall. Marceline was on the phone, pacing in tight circles, yelling into the receiver. One hand clutched her temple. The other clenched tight around the edge of her desk. Inside the room, people were talking over each other. Directors now scrambling, emails, calls, damage control. I just sat down in the chair closest to the window and let it all happen. No need to gloat, no reason to raise my voice. A line floated through my mind. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Well, I knew better now. I stepped into the lobby. A few employees looked up from their desks. One young man nodded. A woman I didn't know smiled faintly. Their expressions weren't confused. They weren't afraid. They looked relieved. I gave a small smile back. Just enough. Around 4, Dad called me into his office. The room was dim, shades drawn halfway. He sat behind the desk. Not as a CEO, but as someone tired. His tie was loose, shirt sleeves rolled. You came with a hammer, he said. I came with proof, I replied. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You could have given us a chance to handle it quietly. I folded my hands. You had years. You made her the face of everything I built. Lenore stepped in just then, holding a folder she didn't hand over. She looked between us, sad, maybe ashamed. There's still a place for family, I said, but only if there's honesty. Dad didn't respond right away. He stood up slowly, walked to the window, then back again. Finally, he nodded once. We'll review compensation, titles, 30 days. I nodded, nothing more to say. I left his office and didn't look back. That evening, at home, I walked into my study, sat down in the chair I'd picked out the week I was first passed over. Opened the small wooden box on the shelf. Inside, my name tag from the brand launch dinner. The one they forgot to print properly. I unpinned it, fastened it to my lapel. Looked at myself in the mirror across the room. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't make me feel small. It just reminded me who I was. The lobby lights were brighter than I'd ever noticed. Media crews lined up outside the glass doors. Cameras poised, microphones ready. I stepped in holding the coat I'd hung on the rack and wore the name tag pinned to my lapel. Mine now. Only mine. The receptionist gave me a nod. A shift in posture that said more than words. From the waiting area I watched Marceline's office door swing open. She stepped out, flustered, security aides following. I paused in the foyer and checked my phone. Hashtag name tag CEO trending. Sources say leadership shakeup imminent. I exhaled slowly. No flare of anger. Just a solid readiness. I reminded myself of Maya Angelou's words. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And I decided that morning I would not be reduced. I straightened my jacket and walked up the stairs toward the stage area. The lights flashing, the cameras waiting. I was ready. I stepped up to the podium under those lights. Caught the hush in the room. Felt the sudden shift. Thank you for showing up. I began calmly. I'm Corliss Vale Hemsworth, and I built what you just applauded. I held up the USB. Slides appeared on the screen behind me. Vendor logos. Excerpts from my original planning documents. The rollout timeline I created last quarter. The audience murmured. Marceline stood off to the side. Her smile was gone, replaced by something brittle. My father watched from the back row. Shoulders lowered. I said, Silence helped them build the story. My voice rewrites it. The line echoed. I invited questions. Cameras clicked. Social feeds lit up. I felt the power shift, clear. Unavoidable. Midway through, a familiar face moved from the crowd. Callum Reed Vance stepped up and tapped the mic. I've known Corliss for more than a decade. He said, she's always been the one behind the scenes. Today we all see it. Applause erupted. Some wiped tears. Marceline's cheeks reddened, her posture slumped. I met Callum's eyes and nodded. This isn't just one woman's fight. I added, it's about every unseen person who carried the weight. The room shook, not with drama, but with recognition. The visuals, the voice, the truth, they aligned. The climax I'd waited for lit up in real time. After the conference, the boardroom convened behind closed doors. Marceline burst in, voice shaking. Corliss, please, let's talk off record. I held steady. There's nothing off record in leadership that demands public trust. My father interrupted. We're initiating a transitional committee under Corliss leadership starting today. Marceline's face drained. I didn't smile. Instead, I turned back to my office, took the name tag from my lapel, and placed it into a small oak box engraved, First Recognition. Final archive. I shut the lid. The boardroom fight had peaked. I walked to the window and gazed out at the evening city lights. The war wasn't over, but the narrative had changed. The sun came in through the kitchen windows like it had always belonged there. No buzz of headlines, no blinking red on my phone, just the sound of birds going about their business outside. I poured a cup of coffee, wrapped my fingers around the mug, and stepped out to the garden. That quilt Mama made, the one with tiny faded corners and stubborn stitching, was draped over the bench beside me. I sat, slow, for the first time in years. I didn't have to brace for anything. The leather journal Callum had given me on my birthday rested on my lap. I opened to a blank page, wrote one word, Grace. Dale Carnegie's voice echoed from somewhere in the back of my mind. Success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. I didn't want a throne anymore. I just wanted this peace, and I finally knew I'd earned it. 2 months had passed since the shake-up at Hemsworth Inc. I hadn't been back since the transition meeting. Then came the envelope, a formal invitation from the board for a quiet garden ceremony. They called it a retirement, but it felt more like a soft thank you. I arrived in a simple navy dress. Nothing sharp or stiff. The board members stood near the terrace. A few familiar faces, some new ones. They handed me a certificate, and with straight faces offered me the CEO title, official. Permanent. I smiled. Not smug, not sarcastic, just sure. I appreciate it, but I've already built what I needed to. Let someone else take it forward. Marceline didn't show. Word was she'd taken a new position in Chicago. No farewell, no note. I didn't feel anything sharp about that, just absence. That was enough. I nominated 2 women from R&D. Sharp minds, big hearts. I said, let them lead the next thing. Together. There was a pause, then nods. Sometimes power means stepping forward. Other times, stepping aside. Later that week, I met Dad for lunch at a little place off 4th Street. No suits, just 2 bowls of chowder between us. He looked down at his spoon and said, I saw what I wanted, not what was true. I let the silence hang before I answered. We don't rewrite history, but we choose what we carry forward. He nodded. That was all either of us needed to say. Back home, I sorted through old documents, placing each one carefully into a cedar chest I hadn't opened in years. Near the bottom, I found the first mock-up I sketched at 16. It was faded, hand-drawn, full of rookie ideas, but the spirit was still there. That mattered. I called my nieces on video. They squealed when I turned the camera to the garden. I told them, this was worth the fight. But remember, you never need to fight to be seen. Not if you see yourself first. That evening, I took my usual spot on the porch. The mug in my hands was warm with peppermint tea. I looked out at the street. Same houses, same trees, but something had shifted. I opened the journal again. Wrote the last line of the story, when they tried to shrink me. I expanded into the silence. Then I tucked it beside the name tag, now sealed in its box for good. My phone buzzed once. A text from Callum. Up for a quiet dinner? No business talk. I smiled. Typed back. Only if dessert's on you. The wind moved through the trees like a quiet song. The story didn't end. It just settled into its next breath.